Hey there, it's Jill Munro for AFTERBUZZ TV, and you are here to check out ESPN's 30 for 30 OJ Made in America.
You're tuning into the destination for TV superfan discussion, AFTERBUZZ TV. And now, let the buzz begin.
What a way to end the weekend, talking about OJ Made in America again. All the great sports stuff, but we can start off talking about OJ, right? So, AfterBuzzers, thank you for tuning in. I am Jill Munro here to talk about OJ Made in America. I've said that like 3 times because that's how excited I am to talk about it. You can check me out at Stiletto Jill, and I'm here with my 2 co-hosts. I am the only female holding it down tonight, and to my left is Gabriel.
Hey guys, you can catch me on Twitter at Double G on TV.
What's up, guys? I am Michael Rippe. You can catch me all over social media at Mike Rips, Mikerips.
Mike Rips and Gabriel. So, this is obviously an 8-hour 30 for 30 special. Usually they're about 2 hours, an hour. So this one is an extremely long one, and there's so much information. And I know it seems like that what could possibly be left to talk about with the O.J. Simpson trial? What topics would we have to explore any further? There was the miniseries that came on FX back in February, The People versus O.J., which was excellent, by the way. And now we have this 8-hour-long documentary, but it was excellent.
And it's split into 5 episodes.
Yes.
Yeah, 8 hours overall.
So this is part 1.
This is part 1. We're going to chat about that and the topics that were on there. If you guys are live in the chat room, remember there's a chat room. Make sure to hit us up or hit us up on Twitter if you have any commentary. So guys, we're just going to start off with the beginning. OJ's early career, going from City College, the City College of San Francisco, a junior college, to USC, a football school, obviously the football school in Southern California. And off rip, he was the guy, the big man on campus, there to push that program further. So how did you feel about the juxtaposition of OJ coming from the Bay Area, where we know a big thing that was discussed was Berkeley, San Jose State, those type of colleges that were heavily involved in the civil rights movement at that time, and OJ coming to a school that basically wasn't involved in all of that?
Well, first of all, I think, it was definitely an interesting experience because so much of OJ anymore is just, him and his criminal activities. So those first 2 minutes where we see OJ of today, that was really crazy. And now taking it back to the beginning, I thought it was very interesting to see how once upon a time, this is who OJ was, big man on campus. I like how they had the professor who said, this is pretty much not just so many students really interacting with an African-American individual, but their first real celebrity interaction, you met OJ, that was a big deal. And to go back and we know what we know now.
So I thought that was interesting what you're saying, but also I thought you said there's a lot of different OJ stuff out there.
Right.
And I think that immediately what I noticed from our first episode here was that there's a lot of new information presented immediately in the first episode. And also there's a lot of real footage. This isn't a made-up show reenacting. There's real footage of OJ when he's younger at USC to mix in, which I don't think a lot of people have seen. I had never seen a lot of this footage.
I think because we are so far removed from that OJ. You have to think that when it's been 20 years since the trial and the murders happened, and from that point on, most of us didn't know anything about O.J. Simpson in 1967 being that college athlete that was setting the standard.
Also, most of us are too young to maybe be all the way back to O.J. Simpson as a college running back and superstar, and then an NFL player. So for me, I certainly am. I was very enlightened already by so much of the past and how OJ was as a human, and I thought that the directing and storytelling was fantastic. And I know that many 30 for 30s are tremendous, and they've been raving about this one being the best ever. So I thought in the first episode we saw so much new stuff, and it was just extremely riveting and exciting to see how it's done. It's got me excited to see the rest.
So let's take it back to the early days of not only OJ's career, but being in Los Angeles and what the climate was at that current time. In the late 60s, obviously, the civil rights movement was taking place. Dr. Martin Luther King was preaching his message, and we were going through various things. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, that was considered sort of the promised land for blacks in the South and in Texas and those areas. So there was a huge migration. My parents were actually a part of that.
Incredible.
They were from the South and moved here during that time period. And so the building up of Los Angeles and being a place where race was, at least in theory, not as much of an issue as in other areas, really was interesting for me to see that it's always kind of been this idealistic place, Hollywood aside, of where you can go and just mix in. And the idea that sports has always been the area where people seem to forget or lose track of the racial differences and the problems that they have, and they just care about winning. So how did that storytelling play into what was happening with OJ's career for you? Because for me, it was really interesting being born in Los Angeles.
Well, for me, they said from the 1940s to the 1960s, there was a 600% growth population of the African Americans, which was, I didn't even know that's how it all went down. So that was really interesting right there. And also talking about how LA was the land of opportunity. You could buy a home, own it, no one was going to take it from you. And then they also showed a little bit early on about the police chief at the time.
Yeah.
Which was an interesting part because
Chief Parker.
They said he was kind of cutthroat, and he turned around the police force from being kind of a joke into like a squared, police officers were known. But then they also had someone saying, I forget who, he was either he was racially insensitive or all the way to racist. So it was interesting to learn about Chief Parker because I'm not even familiar with him, to see the climate. They're kind of setting us up for the climate that OJ was, brought around into when he's starting to rise to fame. So I like how they set the scene sort of for us.
For
With
me,
your, well,
go ahead.
I was going to say, with your original question, it really helped for me because, in the context of OJ, it really helps anchor the narrative, like, okay, it's these, racial tensions and all that in Los Angeles. That's a really big part of history to follow. It was easier through the story to anchor yourself. Okay, this was where OJ was at USC in this time period, and then contextualize it that this was going on. Essentially, they said right over the fence of the Coliseum, pretty much.
Right.
That really, once again, 30 for 30 at its best storytelling as far as, you have the microcosm of the athlete or the team. They do a great job of that. But then they expand it so well. This 30 for 30, obviously, they have so much room to cover because they have so much time. It was really well done. And when we go into that, as far as the tensions that were going on, I thought it was very interesting. And they did a good job of explaining it so quickly that he cleaned up the LAPD, and then because that was still their undoing, because now it's like they cleaned them up to become corrupt again.
Yeah,
that
basically,
to
sort of take advantage of that. I think one of the big things for me seeing OJ out there as a college athlete is something that we take for granted today. We kind of look at athletes and we are accustomed to them not being able to speak out about their thoughts or their feelings and the involvements. And at that time period, there was no way to really separate what you do as your job and who you are as a person, just to be respected. If you think about it, even in current times, some of the things that OJ was battling with when athletes like Muhammad Ali, who, obviously disagreed with being drafted and took those 3 years away from him, these various Bill Russell, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Jim Brown are saying, listen, if I can't have equality for myself and my people on the field, on the court, it's not worth me playing. And for OJ, he just wanted to be recognized as the best to do it. And everybody can understand that. It's not necessarily a wrong thing, but it's an interesting dichotomy, a place to be in where so many people's hopes and dreams are involved in what you do and what you represent. So
it is interesting. It's also interesting you mentioned Muhammad Ali. Another thing that we see in this episode is we see young images of Muhammad Ali, we see Martin Luther King. There's a lot of footage of young black athletes standing up, speaking out, and it's interesting to see how OJ is not really part of them. he kind of separates himself from it all. He just wants to be defined by his football career and kind of being a star.
And that was the big, I guess that got to the crux of the entire episode, which is a very interesting conversation. And because, I almost understood it, and it feels weird just saying that considering what you know about OJ. But it's like, okay, he didn't want to be seen as just another black guy. Okay, he wanted to be more than that. That I can almost, it's like, I understand, you don't want to be put in a box. But then that real separation that when he did that at this time, in this point in history, that he was standing silent and he was benefiting off all the athletes, the Muhammad Ali, Jim Brown.
What they were doing, yeah.
Yeah, he was benefiting it, but he wasn't supporting them. He was just saying, oh, I'm just the football player. And that to me.
I think that that's something that even today, you think about RG3, Robert Griffin III, a couple of years ago as, when he was drafted to the Washington Redskins as their quarterback. And there was the same sort of issue of him about whether he was just a great quarterback or a great black quarterback. And he didn't want to be known as that because some feel that it is, putting them into a category that allows them only to rise so high. So with OJ, you respect that he just wanted to be the greatest and he had that drive and he obviously had a plan for himself very early on. You heard him saying in some of the former footage that, growing up being very poor in Potrero Hill in San Francisco, he wanted to be famous because that's what kids in the hood look up to. They see the players, the illegal gains, and those are the trappings of success. Those are the things that you can eyeball, and it seems like success.
So, they said it in the film. He didn't what you didn't want in the hood growing up for OJ, it wasn't money, it was fame.
Yes.
And they said that very bluntly.
And he mentions that he says, I'm not black, I'm just OJ.
Right. And that was a huge line.
It's a huge line, especially when you recognize that his partners and basically other young black athletes that are stars are all boycotting, and he's taking a different stand kind of on his own. So it's interesting because I didn't really know young OJ. Also, I gotta say, I mean, young OJ's sharp, striking looking, great looking dude, and just he seems so humble. Kind of outwardly.
Did he seem humble to you?
I thought young OJ seemed pretty humble.
I didn't feel young OJ was humble. I felt that he was aware.
Maybe his awareness. It seemed though, even when he was accepting the award, they said he had impeccable character. He seemed very a little bit reserved. I don't know if he grows in and evolves, but it seemed like to me the young OJ. He obviously had a plan, but it did seem like he was a little bit. Just a little reserved, I thought.
I think what you're getting at, that even in that old footage, you could see he had that air about him.
Yes.
I think that's what really came through. And that's, shocking because what we know now, that's what people forget that, OJ wasn't, okay, you can just say OJ was a really great football player. No, this film is showing he was the man, essentially, for a while.
I think that attending USC, if you look at him going to the school of USC, even though, as you brought up, we just talked about USC being right in the hood's backyard, but being so insulated from the culture and the things that he was exposed to, obviously, put him in the position to seek higher, and it set him up for the things that he wanted to see himself evolve into as far as his career goals, his life plan, and so forth. So let's talk about, we obviously know he won the Heisman. And the run.
Yes, against UCLA.
Huge run. That's huge. I mean, that's what set him into instant stardom, they basically say. Yeah. That run kind of set him up.
64 yards.
64 yards to make it to win the game against crosstown rival UCLA.
Huge
and
deal.
What's big to
if
football.
You're not from LA, you have to understand that USC versus UCLA, I'm sure you know that rivalry if you like college football, period. But huge deal in Los Angeles, huge deal at the time for what he, coming from behind, what it represented, all the feelings, we still know alumni programs are big. So imagine at that time when things weren't as scrutinized as they are currently.
And they say it's one of the greatest college plays ever still. And they even, I don't know who said it in the film, but they mentioned that he ran through the defense like foreign water through a tourist.
Yeah, that was a great analogy because you got it. You immediately got how fast OJ was. And I think that has been lost in these recent years is how good of a college star he was, how just talented he was on the field. So let's switch gears and move into his pro career, which obviously did not start off too well. 3 losing seasons in Buffalo.
What, right off the bat.
Cold Buffalo.
Exactly.
Cold Buffalo,
Completely opposite scenarios to go from Los Angeles, California, sun, women, stardom, to Buffalo, New York.
Yeah.
Cold, blue collar town.
Yeah, and they
With
said
a
it
coach that doesn't see your talent in the same way.
Yes,
league
tried
where
to
you're
turn him into a
losing.
receiver, and they said it bluntly. OJ, Buffalo was everything OJ didn't want to be associated with, compared to the glitz and glamour of Hollywood and USC.
Very, very different. So for a second, while we're talking about OJ's pro career, OJ was married very early, at least for our time period. He was married in college when he moved along in there. And we got to see in the first episode some of his childhood friends, his cousin. Joe Bell was his cousin.
Had amazing. I mean, you have to watch it to listen to these stories because they were my favorite part of the entire special.
They were really great. Really a lot of insight into OJ's thought process and how he evolved into the juice.
And the type of person he was. Like,
Yeah.
The crap story.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Okay.
So OJ in high school with his cousin Joe and Al Cowlings, yes, that Al Cowlings that
AC.
drove the Bronco, in the bathroom shooting craps in between time, get caught by their high school football coach. OJ's trying to talk him out of it. They're going to suspend us. Get to the office. OJ talks his way out of getting in trouble, leaves AC and Joe there to take the punishment, and he walks out convincing the dean that he was just helping the coach deliver the...
He just walked out and was like, OJ, why are you leaving? Then he's like, oh, I was just helping coach. And even his friends and family were like,
Wow.
That guy.
self-preservation. And I was like, wow.
And let's not forget the fact that OJ's first wife, Marguerite, was actually AC's girlfriend first.
So he stole his best friend's girl. That's
Mr. Steal Your Girl.
What I don't get, everyone says like, you know what? I got some great friends in life. He stole his best friend's girl, married her, and that best friend is the guy who drove the Bronco in that infamous chase that everyone's seen.
I mean, that's the definition of loyalty.
I hate to say it, but I got friends. I don't know if I have an AC in my corner.
I don't think
many people do.
Right. Nobody does.
I saw that on Twitter and I'm like, damn, if that's not the truth. I couldn't believe that. That was an amazing story.
It just goes to kind of show you and add to the OJ persona and whole substance and how smooth he must be.
And it set up, though, that precursor, like, he must have felt like he could get away with anything.
With anything. And you think about it, his rookie year in 1969, OJ was one of the first athletes to walk into the league with endorsement deals. It was not happening. So he sort of set the stage. I feel like OJ was Michael Jordan before Michael Jordan as far as the endorsement side comes and the impact that he made, because OJ walked in with deals with Chevrolet, RC Cola, and ABC. Before he even played a game of football, he had an on-air commentating deal with ABC. Can you imagine that happening now?
I can't. So it's kind of bizarre for me to think about, but that goes to show you there's so much depth to the OJ character and person that many people, including myself, don't know, and they're giving us this information. And that's why I think ESPN and the director have done a great job already kind of giving you something unique and different.
Absolutely. The thing that was interesting to me is to juxtapose OJ having those bad first 3 years was how well he was doing on the other side with his endorsement opportunities. And we saw how Hurts came up. I think that there's probably no one, if, maybe you're, maybe not Gabriel. Gabriel's kind of a baby, but that doesn't know about OJ running through the airport for Hertz rental car.
I do have YouTube. I'd like to point that out.
I mean, for me growing up, I didn't know. I mean, I knew OJ as a football star that he did that, but I knew OJ the actor and the Pitchman. That's what I remember, in my parents. So I remember him being in the airport and, people thinking that was amazing, as they pointed out in the documentary, seeing an African-American man on TV pitching products that, all sorts of it had nothing to do with sort of the Saturday morning time slot that used to be for African American commercials that came on with Soul Train or things like that. It wasn't like he was with Afro Sheen or things like that. He was with All American apple pie products, and that meant something.
And he also mentioned how he wanted to only associate with like top products,
The number one
brands. So he's obviously very smart.
Savvy. Business savvy.
He even says in interviews that he was looking at past the football. He was great at football, but he realized there was a lot of other things he could do, and that he, that personality and charisma comes off, and charm and shows.
It didn't seem as if he was as interested in football as he was for the other opportunities that football afforded him.
And also a quick point, I think we might have one slight jump. The Hurts deals and all that came after he switched coaches. So now when he actually started, did he win the MVP? It was a little like, I don't know if they had called him that or if he'd actually won the award, but
I think that all came after
the 1973, his 2,000-yard season.
Right. Yeah, and he did that twice.
Wow. I didn't know that.
But they mentioned 1973 as the rebirth of his celebrity.
Yes, and then that's when the Hurts, in 1975 is when the Hurts thing happened. So his football career,
it was shaky.
Took off again when the Hurts deal happened.
We also have to keep in mind that he rushed for 2,000 yards in a 14-game season. That means 2 games less than anybody else had the opportunity to, and he blew it away. I mean, you just have to really understand how difficult it is to rush for 2,000 yards and the type of move and the type of athlete he was. So he did perform on the field and set himself up to go higher, but it seems like OJ would be criticized as one of the athletes currently that doesn't have a passion, a lay down and die passion for the game, and is not chasing the ring, which is what every sports fan hates, not really being dedicated.
Some of the football highlights that they show are pretty incredible to see. OJ, just how smooth and silky he is running and eluding tacklers, and you can really appreciate his greatness in some of these clips.
Slipping through very small holes.
Yep. And I think they put it, I mean, it seems so silly now when you look at our ads, but that electric company, they turn on the juice.
I thought that was probably brilliant at the time. And the fact that he was savvy enough to include his teammates in his winning that honor and rushing for that made them feel included and probably made them want to fight more for him, and goes to his mystique.
And sorry, that's the part of when I said I thought he was a bit humble, and that's what I think I took from it, because you see, even when he broke the 2,000 yards, he didn't write the 2,003 yards. He had 3,000.
The team's number of yards.
Rushing yards, and he talked about how he wanted to play long enough so that he could play with all of his offensive linemen, so that no one else could come in and play with them and break his record. So it seemed like he was younger OJ. It seemed like he was a team guy. I mean, partially you see he's doing all the business deals, but it seemed like he kind of knew how to play the game early on. And the plan was all set out. And so those were interesting interviews. To see the team guy was really interesting to me.
Definitely. And that's, I guess, a question you'd have to raise. Was OJ always playing his angle? Because being the team guy, being a good guy, it makes you a darling for, everybody. Endorsements. So was that like, hey, I don't like Buffalo, but if I do this, I'm going to get those commercials? I mean, I guess for me, I took those scenes with a grain of salt, because you know what? Certainly it didn't hurt that he was celebrating his teammates. No. That locker room didn't hate him when they got that TV exposure.
Absolutely.
But was it an angle? That's the question I had when I was watching that.
I think that it was a bit of both. I think that it definitely was an angle, and it was one he knew he could push out that would be advantage to him. But I think that he also probably had a great love for his teammates, because you have to think that he likely was miserable those first 3 years there, and those were the people that he was with.
I felt, when I look at the interviews and I see OJ, and there's not a ton, but I felt there was an authenticity to the way he was speaking, and when he collected the Heisman, when he broke the record and included his teammates, because you don't have to do that. And the way I felt in those moments was I felt he was being authentic, which to me, I never saw that OJ. That's before my time. So seeing that, it felt like, wow, like this is a guy that he had it all. He was crushing it. He had it all. And the young OJ was just the dynamic, and the individual is very, interesting to me.
No, definitely. And one of the things the film just did a great job, onto that, he had nothing. He wouldn't have gotten any of that if he wasn't one of the best football players at the time. I mean, we were talking about this before the show, just the recognizable names that he was with, you know, Barry Sanders and all that, who've accomplished that feat. I mean, it's hard to do for the athletes and players today.
Yes.
And, you know, one of the things that we always harp on in sports is that regardless of generation to generation, athletes as a whole, with the advancements in science, equipment, and all that, they're just better. They run faster. They're stronger. People still have a hard time, you know, rushing that many yards in that, you know, in a season. So that's really
with 2 extra games.
Exactly, with extra time and all that. So whatever, you know, happened later, the fact is OJ was one special football player.
He really, really was.
Absolutely.
So as we move along and we get to sort of the mid part of his career where they are starting to win games, but not obviously a championship, and we see OJ alluding to that he's looking past football. Rather early on, if you think about it, he only played 10 years, which I know that football, most people say stands for, the NFL stands for not for long, but you would think with someone of his talent and his caliber that he would want to, you know, keep trying for that ring just a little bit more. That's one thing, even though I saw his competitive edge and he was great in football, it was something that was interesting to me was that how he just seemed to lose it for the Hollywood side. I mean, I think, who was it that said he was seduced by the white culture? I thought that that was a great line because it just set up so many different things about OJ. I feel that he wanted the attention, but being at USC, right close to Hollywood and all those different things that flowed through there, that sort of infected him, whereas football became secondary.
I think so. And also you do have to remember that earlier, you know, their contracts in football and the NFL were not the same as they are today.
Not at all.
Yeah.
So we're not talking about where he was he was one of the highest paid football players.
And he was comfortable. I think that's the word they used.
But it wasn't the same as today where you're making millions on millions and millions. And so I could see the attraction to the Hollywood lifestyle and the women.
That's where his money came from.
Even adjusted for inflation, you know, he wouldn't, you know, he wasn't making the same money that he was in Hollywood with all of his endorsements and just the analyst deal. And
the lifestyle of, you know, the difference between Buffalo, New York and Los Angeles is it's different.
No offense to the people in Buffalo. I'm sure it's a lovely town to raise kids.
I've been to Buffalo. I went to school in Syracuse. I know the cold weather. I love upstate New York. I'm just comparing. There are differences. Very
different winters. It's a little different slightly.
It's extremely difficult when you come from the warm weather and go there as opposed to growing up in a cold weather place.
That's very true.
You don't, if you grow up in a cold weather city, you don't really know the same. But if you grow up in warm weather and you go to cold weather, it affects you in a different manner. And I'm sure that happened to OJ.
Very much so. And also, you know, when you obtain a certain level of celebrity, it tends to insulate you from reality, not just because of race, but just in general, because of a class issue, because of privilege that becomes extended to it. So it was interesting. I think it was Joe again that was talking about the scene when they were playing tennis at the Kardashians, Beverly Hills
when he first met
Mansion.
Kardashian.
Yeah, and that OJ was like, you know, I don't care. I'm OJ. I'm not worried about the struggle or what it represents. I'm doing me. And you have to respect that from people, you know, especially now when we're always talking about the grind and, you know, be first. And if you're not first, you're last. I know that's Ricky Bobby, but that, you know, clearly that thought process takes you through athletics, but OJ was kind of looked down for it. I think if you think about OJ and sort of what the documentary is setting up is that he was one of the first athletes to sort of be considered a sellout. I don't even know if that term actually existed at that time period, but you sort of understand where that thought process came from and how that evolved as such. So I have to ask, do you guys blame OJ for wanting to, you know, push his independent career goals and not really also, you know, be a part of the people? Because not just for your race, but anybody sort of seems to take where they came from with them as a badge of honor, and he definitely didn't want to be associated with that.
I'm gonna say, to answer your question just as it's phrased, yes, because you know what, part of it is, I can understand, you know, okay, he was just trying to do his thing, he just wanted to be a great football player, didn't matter if he was black, white, any other race. But the fact is, you know, you, like you just said, you carry that with you, you know, at the end of the day, yeah, I'm just hosting. I wouldn't want someone to say I'm a Hispanic host, but the fact is, I understand. I have this skin tone. I can speak Spanish, wherever that lands me. I understand that. And, it seemed like OJ, he was doing everything to avoid that. He seemed to do everything to get people to not mention that he was black, it seemed like. And I understand. He used that. He leveraged it into so much money and endorsement. And from the film, from the footage, from the interviews, you get the idea he liked that lifestyle.
Very much so.
Yes.
Yeah, it's hard to say because I can't get into OJ's head. From what I see, I think that OJ was just so enamored with the lifestyle of being rich and famous and everything that was associated with it, and that everything else was secondary. OJ was going to be OJ. It didn't matter his skin color. I think, he probably saw other black superstar athletes doing it and felt like they're handling it. I'm just going to kind of reap the benefits.
And he also pointed out, he said that it was in an interview later when he talked about how when he was in college, they tried to rope him into that conversation. And he very much said that he felt that it hurt their careers and their future development and growth, by championing that cause.
Exactly. And I think that he was more concerned, right or wrong, with living a certain lifestyle. And I mean, he says from when he's young, he wants to be fame. He wants to have fame, wants to be famous. And I think he got the taste of it and he was hooked. And so everything else was kind of secondary, and race didn't really matter to him. As you can see, I mean, he just he hangs out with white people. He hangs out with black people. It wasn't about race to him. As far as everything else around him is going on, he's kind of incubated in his own. They even say that he was so embraced that he was immune from the reality that he was a black man.
I think there was someone that was talking about I can't recall where they were having lunch, and OJ was at a table with some other black people, and a woman said, look, there's OJ and a derogatory term and a table full of derogatory term. And OJ wasn't upset about the statement. He was like, no, that's great. That means that I'm accomplishing what I set out to do because she knows I'm different. That was really impactful for me because it's just... It was just really powerful because you're denying who you are, even though it's great that you're acknowledged. They might have loved you regardless. We'll never know.
Even the tennis scene, when his friend is super upset.
Yes.
They're just using you, we're only here because you're OJ, and he laughs it off.
And he's
like, yes, I am
like
OJ.
that.
And he's like,
That's okay.
Right. He was cool. Yeah. He didn't care what the reasoning behind everything. He was just living this life that he loved.
I think that was another Joe Bell story.
He
mentioned that he was like that. He was lost. OJ, he was so blind to his own situation, and I think that's another big point that made it through in the film, just how much enabling was around OJ.
But I think that's with athletes in general. Yes. I don't think that I can look at it and say that OJ was treated any differently than any athlete that people think will be a superstar or has some bit of celebrity. I think that's the culture.
I guess I go to the way that the film was framed in that statement then, because to paraphrase, I'm not comfortable saying it, it said, if you're going to be black in a big city,
you should be in Los Angeles.
LA. That's where he went, Best friends, I mean, he stole his best friend's girl and the guy drove the getaway car. I mean, friends today, would they forgive that? Probably not. Then again, okay, that's another situation. The coach, he got lucky that he eventually got a coach who turned him into the juice.
Right.
He had a lot of breaks cut, and I think when you have something like that, maybe you do feel a little... like you can do it. Like
but
there's rules don't apply.
Yeah, those breaks come because of his talent. So it's an interesting thing, Michael.
And any great superstar gets enabled, especially the great ones. And he was just an earlier one to have it.
To set the stage.
To set the stage.
So let's talk a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about. So we've mentioned sort of OJ's character quirks and how charming he was, and things like that. And we all know that what comes along with celebrity and athletes are women and the lifestyle that we've mentioned several times, partying and so forth. towards the end of the first episode, we were introduced to how OJ and Nicole met. And it was a pretty interesting situation. There was a club called the Daisy out in LA, really popular. And during that time period, the early 70s, the groupie scene in rock and roll and, furthermore, it was really big in LA. You've heard about, if you've seen that movie Almost Famous with Cameron Crowe, you know that there were underage groupies literally everywhere in that matter. And so Nicole was a waitress at 18 years old in the Daisy, and OJ was smitten from the moment he set eyes on her. It seemed like a really passionate, just really locked in relationship.
While he was married at the time.
While he was married, which
To
isn't
his
surprising.
best friend's
Yeah.
girl
Yeah,
with
while he was married.
kids.
So they also mentioned that Marguerite, his first wife, felt like a single mother. They lived in Bel Air, but she was often alone with the children. And that's something that you even hear now because athletes are on the road so much and so things like that. And OJ, obviously being just down the street from Hollywood, was very enamored with the lifestyle and a young blonde surfer girl in Nicole. What I thought was interesting and very telling, sort of setting up their whole relationship, was Nicole's friend that was interviewed. I don't know if he was a roommate, but that he talked about Nicole's first date with OJ, that she came home and it seemed like there might have been a date rape situation happening.
She'd been
or
a little roughed
he
up.
was a little
Forceful.
aggressive, but she liked him, so
I thought
she overlooked it.
I thought towards the end of this episode, the Nicole introduction, I thought it was tremendous.
Yes.
Really, like, as from a filmmaking and a storytelling type of view, because it gave you everything. It gave you the introduction of an integral character to this whole story, this whole human's life, and it kind of set up the future, gave you a little scene of Nicole, how pretty she was, where she started, and then, but they give you that little bit of that first date and how there's something amiss. Because when they describe that first date, to me, that is
Terrifying.
not normal.
Yeah, not at all. Not at all.
To stay out till 2 a.m., to have the little bit of a physicality involved, everything seems wrong, and yet it seems like she's saying it's so right.
She was agreeing, and 2 weeks later from that, he is telling her while he's still married, look, I'm getting you an apartment, I'm getting you a car, I'm gonna set you up, and we're going to be
So you
good.
see immediately, right?
The control.
Well, what I think, what we're getting at it from the storytelling standpoint, we get just that first hint of the story we do all know. This was all kind of stuff, maybe, if you consider it, part one was probably the story we forgot about OJ.
Or that most people didn't know. Yeah.
Yeah, or I guess, that's been overlooked recently.
Yeah.
The end was we're introducing the story we are more familiar with. But I also think, one, I love that they picked such a amazing quote from Nicole's sister. They had a real love affair. That's what makes this so sad. That was so powerful.
Yeah.
And another quote to top on that is that OJ's telling them, I'm going to marry that girl, while he's still married and everything.
Right. And there's no mention of, they mentioned that his wife felt like a single mother, but there was no mention that there was strife or that they were having issues or that, he had ever, I assume that there were women, but that there was ever a point where he wanted to leave his family. That was powerful to me. I don't know what he saw.
I actually thought, when I break it down and as I understand, there's still tension with interracial dating today in some places, this was, do they have the year when he met Nicole?
I think it was like 1978, 79-ish.
Things even more different than from when they are
Very
now.
much so,
Young, white, blonde, for OJ.
Taboo.
Yes, and I thought that might have been a very big part of the appeal. And, OJ, as we've kind of come to see, felt like he could do anything. So I thought that was a big part of it. Perhaps Marjorie maybe representing part of the life he was trying to leave behind. They grew up in the rougher San Francisco. That was introduced.
I know that it wasn't mentioned in this episode, but they also lost a child early. Their child drowned. They had 3 children. One of their children drowned in a backyard pool accident. So I remember reading when I was younger that caused some distance for them in their marriage. So I don't know. Maybe we'll find out later as we get into more episodes regarding Nicole and that relationship, sort of how that might have played a part in it. But I too was definitely struck by him saying, I'm going to not date, not get married.
So confident in
Yeah.
it, and just to have that confidence or arrogance or whatever it is while you're married, it starts to show you where, as I said, I thought a young OJ was humble and kind of reserved. Now you're seeing that segue from OJ, he's a star, because we also quickly didn't touch on that he started filming a movie, Capricorn 1.
Yes.
Yeah.
But so you see the transition, and now it sets us up where, okay, now we're going to get the introduction of the relationship with Nicole and everything else that comes along. And as I said at the start, it's riveting, and it makes me not want it. I didn't want this episode to end. Where's part 2? What are we going to wait?
Tuesday.
Yeah. So since we're getting to that point, what are you looking forward to seeing in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 episodes that are coming up?
You know what? I think the biggest thing that I'm looking forward to is they've done such a great job introducing it that I'm really interested to see, you know, how the people around OJ reacted to the Nicole situation, because I feel like there's going to be an indicator more of the tension and how he was maybe trying to break that line at the expense
racial
of
tensions, yeah.
at the expense of his people. And when I say that, I mean his friends
His
who
close
also
relationships.
are going to see it as a racial thing.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be very interesting because I feel like we're going to see a parallel between what he was doing and the world changing around him. And I think that's going to be very fun.
Definitely. And I think that I'm interested to see more of the development of OJ's past relationship, basically with his wife, how that kind of concludes, what happens, and also how his relationship with Nicole develops. Because, yes, obviously at this point I know about OJ and Nicole the later years, but I don't know about the courting of Nicole until
Right.
tonight, and the love affair that they had, and where it went wrong, and everything else that's involved. And I think so far the storytelling has given me so much new information about OJ, the human and the person before the murders, that I'm so excited to see more character development and understanding of how OJ was before kind of the OJ on trial.
Right.
Yes.
And really quickly, let's talk about the fact that OJ, the one thing he probably wasn't great at, acting. He pretty much sucked at that. But, you know, he evolved. I guess the Naked Gun roles were pretty good, right? But we'll see that later. So that is it for episode 1. Thank you for taking the time to watch with us for Made in America, OJ, ESPN's 30 for 30. We will be back for more coverage on the episodes next week. So make sure you're checking us out. I'm Jill Munro. You can check me out at Stiletto Jill on all social media. Gabriel?
Hey guys, as always, you could catch me on Twitter at Double G on TV.
And guys, I'm Michael Rippe. You can catch me all over social media at Mike Rips. It's right here in the sidebar. Also, shout out to America.
Shout out to America.
See you guys next time.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.